Good afternoon. This is Alex Cook with part 5 of my book to film adaptation series. I'm cheating a little bit today with today's book and film adaptation. The book I'm looking at today is March, Book 1, and the film I'll be comparing it to is Selma, which came out 2 years ago. So, technically, I'm not cheating because March is a 3 book series, and book 3 does detail the accounts of what happened in Selma in 1965, while March Book 1 is more about the lunch counter sit-ins that happened during the Civil Rights Movement, and Selma is, as you can probably tell from the title, about the march from Selma to Montgomery for the Voting Acts Right of 1965. However, it's good to compare these two because one is a first count account, one first hand account, because the book is actually written by Congressman John Lewis, who was very heavily involved in the protests as a young man. And the film is a dramatization of him, contains a dramatization of him and his involvement. So the book itself is very not, I won't say overly visually stunning. It is in black and white, which does add kind of a really nice tone, as well as some dramatic effects. And it is a graphic novel, so there's lots of pictures, which help to further along the story. And because the book is written about him, it also gives a lot of detail and insight into his backstory and his, well, not backstory per se, but into his life as a young man growing up in Alabama. And Selma is actually a very powerful movie for a dramatization of history, and it has a very hard responsibility because it has to detail all of this history correctly, or it will fail and be awful. And personally, from my point of view, I saw the movie, and the only thing um, that I have seen was not believable, and this was in an article actually in an interview with John Lewis. Is John Lewis commented that LBJ was not as much of a dick as the movie portrayed him to be, and those were his exact words. But for the rest of it, the movie got a lot of it on par. The movie actually opens with Martin Luther King receiving the Nobel Peace Prize and then a flash to uh, a church bombing where 4 young girls were killed, and then a flash to where a black woman was trying to register to vote and showing the unfair and unjust system that was in place to keep black people from voting in the South in the 1960s. Um, so the book so book 3 actually does more go into more detail about his point of view of um the march. However, the opening of book 1 actually does have this really incredible scene of a conversation between John and somebody else during the march, where they're standing on the bridge and the police threaten them and uh, yell at them to disband, and then there's just a few pictures or drawings of the violence that happened. Um, and in Selma, it goes to some very dark. It never goes too far to make the movie too dark. But it does still show a lot of violence, and a lot of what was happening, and it gives a real impact to the idea um, of what was going on. And the movie actually also provides a good education, because I personally, first of all, I did not know about that the Selma March took 5 days, and I also did not know that there were actually 3 attempts. The first one is the one that I mentioned, where the police attacked the protesters. In the second one, the marchers got about as far as the same bridge where they had been attacked when Martin Luther King prayed and decided, no, we're not doing this, and turned the march around, and everybody went home. And it wasn't until the third attempt that they were able to march from Selma to Montgomery to for the act of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And the one thing that really is interesting to me, which I had known about the book, but it stuck out to me when I read it, there is a museum in New York that actually has a lunch counter setup where you can go and sit and you put headphones on and it makes you it gives you an experience of what was happening to these poor people who were sitting at lunch counters. You hear all these insults, these swears, and the longer you sit, the worse it gets. The chair will start to shake. And people can't really last that long for obvious reasons. And the reading of the book actually is a great insight because it's also going back and forth to John Lewis's present day as a congressman versus his time at the lunch counter protests, and seeing all of the interesting, like, all the training and all the preparation that went into this protest is so powerful and moving. So I definitely recommend both the book and the movie, because though the movie is not a direct adaptation, they are both very good representations of history, and both have their own form of getting their message to people. So that is my review. Read the book, see the movie, have a great day.